Until the lions have their own historians, the tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. The term ancient Nubia refers to the ancient civilizations and cultures in the Middle Nile region. The Nile River's cataracts are sections characterized by shallow water and numerous rocky outcrops, which create rapids and obstacles for navigation. 6 major cataracts are located along the Nile, primarily between Aswan in Egypt and Khartoum in Sudan. These cataracts have historically been significant for various reasons, including their impact on trade and transportation along the Nile. Nubia is a vast historical region traversed by the Nile, the longest river in Africa. This region historically encompassed the territories of the 2 Sudans, southern Egypt and present-day Ethiopia. Ancient Egyptians called Nubia Ta-Seti, the land of the archers. Historically, this region has often been portrayed as poorly understood, a vassal territory under Egyptian control, a distinct and opposing entity to Egypt, or as the land of the Black Pharaohs of the 25th dynasty. Since the 19th century, during the peak of Western imperialism and the recognition of Egypt as one of the greatest civilizations in history, efforts have been made to obscure the truth about Egypt's African roots. At that time, racist ideologies classified black people as non-human, making it unacceptable to acknowledge that they were the founders of this influential culture. As a result, a concerted effort has been made to separate Sudan, associated with the Black world, from ancient Egypt, creating an artificial divide between the two. Early European scholars characterized the Egyptian-Nubian relationship as conqueror and conquered, initiator and follower, model and imitation. It is worth noting that the Nubian origins of Egyptian civilization, although recognized by official Egyptology, have been suppressed. Let's explore this further. The Egyptians have always been clear about their Nubian origin. African historian Cheikh Anta Diop stated that the Egyptians themselves, if we acknowledge that they were in the best position to speak about their origins, unequivocally recognized that their ancestors came from Nubia and the heart of Africa. Nubia's geographical position connects it not only to Egypt, but also to the African Great Lakes region, southern and central Africa, where modern humans first emerged about 300,000 years ago. These regions were the origin of the first populations that settled and developed Nubia during prehistoric times. The first black populations to civilize Nubia were initially fishermen from the African Great Lakes and surrounding regions. These populations gradually migrated down the Nile, bringing with them a lifestyle deeply connected to water, including water-related rituals, navigation, and boat construction. The Great Lakes region of Africa is a geographical area in East and Central Africa that includes several of the largest and most significant freshwater lakes on the continent. This region is notable for its ecological diversity, cultural richness, and historical significance. The major lakes in this region are Lakes Victoria, Tanganyika, Malawi, also known as Nyasa, Albert, Edward, Kivu, and Turkana. The cartography of Africa during the Pharaonic era reflects the ancient Egyptians' view of the continent's orientation. They identified 3 main regions: Ta-Neta, the Holy Land or Great Lakes region, which corresponds to the Great Lakes region; Ta-Seti, Nubia, and Ta-Meri, Egypt. Egypt and Nubia were populated through migrations originating from the Great Lakes region of Africa. The populations of the Great Lakes region, with their accumulated knowledge since the dawn of humanity, were gradually joined in the Nile Valley by hunters, gatherers, and especially herders. The fusion of these diverse cultures in the Nile Valley led to the formation of Nubian civilization during prehistoric times. From Nubia, the meeting point of African populations, emerged the black populations, such as the Anu, who would go on to civilize various regions of the world. For example, the name Canaanites, which refers to the black Phoenician civilizers of the so-called Near East, comes from Kinanu, descended from the Anu. Among the Sumerians, the first black civilizers of Mesopotamia, one of the names for God was Anu. The Sabaeans, the first black and animist civilizers of South Arabia, were also of Anu origin. The first black civilizers in India, the Dravidians, called their god Agni. The first black inhabitants of Japan were known as the Ainu. The Scorpion Pharaoh, one of the pharaohs who ruled before Narmer, the first pharaoh of unified Kemet, is the oldest known depiction of a pharaoh. This pharaoh was Nubian. The Nubians practiced matriarchy, circumcision, totemism, and monotheism, with one god who they called Amun. The creator, Amun, however, manifested in various forms, such as Isis, Osiris, Thoth, and Horus, similar to Kemet, Egypt. The later pharaonic civilization of Kemet essentially began as the Nubian civilization in prehistoric times. It evolved into Kemetic civilization in antiquity, spreading throughout the lower Nile Valley to the delta. This is why the first Kemetic pharaohs were actually Nubian. The foundation of pharaonic civilization was Nubian, indicating that the Sudanese ruled Egypt long before the 25th dynasty, contrary to Western claims. Sheikh Anta Diop, a renowned African historian, stated, "Until the end of the Egyptian Empire, the kings of Nubia bore the same title as the Pharaoh of Egypt, that of Sparrowhawk of Nubia. This indicates that all Egyptian pharaohs acknowledged and embraced their Sudanese origins and the Nubian roots of pharaonic kingship." Diop also mentions that the priestess of Amun, or god, of Thebes, the holiest site in Egypt, could only be a Sudanese Meroitic. Diodorus Siculus, a Greek historian, reported an annual ritual in which the statue of Amun was taken to Nubia for a few days before being returned, symbolizing Amun's connection to Nubia. It is worth noting that besides the Sudanese pharaohs, referred to as black pharaohs by Western scholars, 18 others were born in Nubia, along with many others born in Kemet who were also black. The term black pharaoh, as portrayed by Egyptologists, is therefore misleading. It is also worth noting that the relationship between Kemet and Nubia was often fraught with tension. Kemet frequently annexed Nubian territories by force, notably during the reigns of Kakare-sen-Useret, also known as Sesostris III, Thutmose III, and Ramses II. As Kemet's power waned around 1070 BC, the kingdom of Kush, or Nubia, gained independence and grew politically influential. This era, the 25th dynasty, marked Egypt's last significant period of prosperity beyond its traditional borders, until the Assyrians defeated the Sudanese pharaohs in 663 BC, leading to Kemet's eventual absorption into the Roman Empire in 30 BC. The empire was defended by a formidable army known for its soldiers mounted on elephants. Its archers, the most prestigious corps, spread terror among enemies with their astounding precision, often hitting their opponents in the eyes. The army featured a hierarchical structure led by the king or queen, with notable contributions from archers, cavalry, and war elephants. Nubian soldiers were known for their large ox-hide shields and simple yet effective weapons like axes, pikes, and swords. The Kushites excelled in both defensive fortifications and offensive siege tactics, supported by a capable naval force. Their military campaigns were characterized by strategic prowess and rigorous training. For example, the mighty Persian emperor Cambyses II, who invaded Egypt in the 6th century BC, dared to venture towards Sudan, but was violently repelled by the pharaoh of Barua, who had previously warned him of the invincibility of his archers. Similarly, the Arabs, after conquering Egypt in the 7th century AD, met the same fate during their initial advancement on Barua. Despite Roman attempts to control Nubia, their efforts were thwarted by a remarkable pharaoh queen, Kandake Amanirenas, who defeated them and expanded the borders of Nubia into Kemet. Around 24 BC, the Nubian queen Amanirenas led a fierce resistance against the Roman Empire's attempts to conquer Nubia. Amanirenas became head of state upon the death of her husband, Emperor Teriketas, in 40 BC. Following African matriarchal tradition, she rightfully assumed full power over this nation, which had given rise to pharaonic Egypt 3,300 years earlier. In the history of Africa, particularly within one of its most dominant civilizations, women have never held such high stature and power. Her name, Amanirenas, means Amani is her name, with Amani being the Nubian name for Imana, Amen, or Amun, the singular god of Africa. When Emperor Augustus imposed a tax on the Kushites, Amanirenas and her son, Akinidad, refused to pay, sparking a conflict. Nubia launched a surprise attack on Roman territories, successfully capturing Syene, Phyle, and Elephantine, taking Roman prisoners, and seizing statues of Augustus. The Romans retaliated under General Petronius, but despite losing an eye and her son, Amanirenas persisted, ultimately negotiating a favorable peace treaty. The treaty exempted Nubia from paying tribute and established a stable frontier, showcasing Amanirenas' tenacity and strategic insight in defending her kingdom against one of the world's most powerful empires. Following this, the Meroitic period saw stability for Kush, lasting over 300 years until the empire fragmented into three Christianized black kingdoms. Nubia comprised the three kingdoms of Nubadia, Makuria, and Alwa, when it was converted to Christianity by Byzantine missionaries just before 600 AD. This conversion brought significant social changes and introduced new artistic and architectural symbols. Many churches were built and richly decorated with paintings, while Christian motifs like the cross and the fish appeared on pottery. Burial practices also became more straightforward, with graves containing only clothing and wrappings. After Muslims conquered Egypt in 641 AD, an Arab army attacked Makuria, Nubia's capital. However, the Nubian archers, known for their incredible accuracy, successfully repelled the attackers. In 651 AD, Christian Nubia and Muslim Egypt negotiated a peace treaty called the Bact, which also served as a trade agreement. Islam gradually spread to Nubia over time. The infamous Bact Treaty regulated trade between Christian Nubia and Islamic Egypt for nearly 600 years. This trade included gold and ivory, and enslaved people exchanged for Egyptian textiles, ceramics, and glass. In northern Nubia, Muslim merchants controlled trade using coinage, while the southern kingdoms traded by barter as a royal monopoly. Over time, as the Nubian kingdoms weakened, Egypt's Mamluk rulers and Arab colonizers increased Islamic influence in Nubia during the 14th and 15th centuries. The Nubians gradually converted to Islam. This process contributed to the Arab-Muslim identity of present-day Sudan. Despite these transformations, Nubia, with its rich African heritage and legacy, retains its significance as the cradle of black civilizations. Until the lions have their own historians, the tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter.